On day 15 of this war, something happened that instantly made military analysts around the world pause. Because Iran launched a missile it had never fired in combat before. Not earlier in this war, not in any previous regional conflict, never once in history against any real battlefield target. And the moment that missile appeared, a new question quietly started circulating inside intelligence circles. Why was this weapon saved until day 15 instead of being used at the beginning of the war? Because if Iran possessed this capability from the start, then the real mystery is not the missile itself. The real mystery is what other capabilities might still be waiting behind the curtain. The missile is known as the Sajil ballistic missile, a two-stage solid fuel system capable of traveling up to 2,500 kilometers, carrying a warhead estimated between 500 and 1,500 kilograms, and designed specifically to survive modern missile defense environments. For years, American, Israeli, and European intelligence agencies studied this missile carefully, analyzing satellite imagery, studying test launches, modeling its flight patterns, and debating when Iran might finally decide to use it. But until March 15, 2026, the Sajil had never been used against an actual enemy target anywhere on Earth. And when it finally launched toward Israel on day 15 of the war, Israeli authorities quickly confirmed that a missile strike had occurred. They confirmed interceptors were launched. They confirmed multiple missiles were intercepted during the same attack wave. And they confirmed that at least 2 people were injured in the strikes. But here is where the story becomes more complicated. Because what Israeli officials did not confirm was what happened to the specific target the Sajil missile successfully reached. Due to a strict information blackout surrounding military infrastructure damage, the exact effect of the warhead remains unknown. And that missing detail is exactly what has analysts uneasy. Because the Sajil is not simply another missile added to Iran's already large arsenal. According to years of military analysis, it may actually be the most survivable long-range missile Iran possesses. And the reason for that advantage comes down to something that sounds simple but changes everything: the type of fuel it uses. Most of Iran's older ballistic missiles rely on liquid propellant systems. Liquid fuel missiles are powerful, but they come with one major weakness. They need preparation time before launch. Fuel trucks must arrive at the launch site. The propellant has to be loaded carefully. System diagnostics must be run. Launch sequences must be initiated step by step. And all of that preparation creates something extremely valuable for the opposing side: a detection window. American and Israeli satellites continuously monitor Iranian missile bases from space. The moment fuel trucks appear near a launch complex, analysts know something might be about to happen. And that early warning sometimes allows a missile to be destroyed before it even leaves the ground. But the Sajil changes that entire equation, because the Sajil uses solid fuel propulsion. Solid fuel missiles require no fueling process before launch. They can remain stored in launch containers for long periods of time, already prepared. When the command comes, they can be launched within minutes, which means the traditional detection window shrinks dramatically, sometimes to almost zero. By the time satellites detect the launch signature, the missile is already airborne and accelerating toward its target. That single technical difference dramatically increases the survivability of the weapon. And now we return to the question that makes day 15 so interesting. If Iran had this missile available, why wait until day 15 to use it? Why not introduce it on day 1 of the war when the shock value would have been even greater? Why not deploy it during the first major missile exchanges? Why reveal it exactly after 2 weeks of fighting? Because by the time day 15 arrived, the situation looked very different from how it looked at the beginning. American and Israeli forces had already carried out an extremely intense air campaign against Iranian military infrastructure. Rough estimates suggested that nearly 75% of Iran's missile launch infrastructure had been damaged or destroyed. Iranian missile launch activity had reportedly dropped by almost 90% from its peak levels earlier in the war. International media narratives had already started forming a clear conclusion. Iran's offensive capabilities were being systematically degraded, but precisely when that narrative began to solidify, Iran suddenly introduced a missile it had never used before, and that single decision sent a very different signal. Because that is not the behavior of a military that is running out of options. That is the behavior of a military that has been carefully managing its inventory, deciding exactly when certain capabilities should appear on the battlefield. In other words, Iran may have been saving specific tools for specific moments, and according to that logic, day 15 was chosen deliberately. But the Sajil launch was only part of what happened that day. Because at the same time, Iran launched 7 separate waves of missile attacks against Israel. 7 waves, within a single day. That number immediately caught the attention of defense analysts, because 7 waves are not necessarily the fastest way to cause maximum destruction. But 7 waves are extremely effective at doing something else, forcing defensive systems to keep firing interceptors over long periods of time. And that timing became even more interesting when Hebrew media reported another development on the same day. Israel's interceptor stockpiles were reportedly running low, not empty, not exhausted, but low enough to become strategically important. And when you combine those facts together, a pattern begins to emerge. A new missile type appears. 7 attack waves are launched, and reports surface that defensive interceptor supplies are shrinking. That combination suggests something very specific. Iran may be escalating precisely at the moment when Israel's defenses are under maximum strain, and the structure of the attacks seems designed to force interceptor usage over extended periods of time. But the battlefield pressure is only one layer of the story. Because while missiles dominate the headlines, another quiet calculation is unfolding in the background. It is called Interceptor Math. Israel's missile defense network, including systems like Arrow and David's Sling, was designed under certain operational assumptions. Iran would launch large barrages. Israel would intercept most incoming missiles. A small percentage would still get through. And shelters combined with early warning systems would limit civilian casualties. In many ways, that system has actually worked as designed. The majority of incoming missiles have indeed been intercepted. But the designers of the system focused primarily on interception percentages. What they did not fully account for was how long the conflict might last, because missile defense systems do not operate on unlimited ammunition. Every interceptor launched costs millions of dollars. And more importantly, interceptors cannot be produced instantly. Manufacturing these systems requires specialized factories, complex supply chains, and months of production time. Even massive emergency funding cannot magically double factory output overnight. The United States learned this reality earlier in the conflict. During the first 5 days of the war, American forces fired nearly 800 Patriot interceptors. Military officials later admitted that rate of use was not sustainable for long periods. Israel has now been defending its airspace continuously for 15 days. And those threats are coming from multiple directions at once. Iranian ballistic missiles, rocket attacks from Lebanon, drone swarms, cluster munitions, and now solid fuel Sajil missiles with almost no launch warning time. Over time, that kind of pressure gradually drains interceptor stockpiles, which means commanders eventually face difficult decisions. Which incoming threats must be intercepted immediately, and which ones might have to be allowed through. But the implications of this war are no longer limited to the battlefield, because another front is quietly emerging: the global economy. The Strait of Hormuz remains one of the most critical oil shipping routes on the planet. Any instability there immediately affects global energy markets. Shipping companies raise insurance premiums. Tanker traffic slows down. Oil prices climb. And when oil prices climb, everything else becomes more expensive too. Gas prices increase. Airline tickets become more costly. Transportation costs rise. Supply chains become more expensive. And suddenly a regional conflict begins affecting ordinary people thousands of miles away. But perhaps the most dangerous escalation of all has not happened yet. Because the most powerful weapon both sides possess is not a missile. It is cyber warfare. Both Iran and the United States have spent decades building sophisticated cyber capabilities capable of targeting infrastructure, power grids, banking systems, water treatment plants, industrial control networks, transportation systems, hospitals. Entire economies can be disrupted without a single missile launch. And so far, both sides appear to be holding those capabilities in reserve. Because once cyber warfare begins openly, escalation becomes much harder to control. A cyber attack on one country's power grid could trigger retaliation somewhere completely different. Financial systems could freeze. Cities could experience prolonged blackouts. And identifying exactly who launched the attack might take weeks. That uncertainty makes cyber conflict extraordinarily dangerous. Which is why, 15 days into the war, both sides seem reluctant to open that door. But every day this war continues, that restraint becomes more difficult. Every day missiles continue flying. Every day interceptor supplies shrink. Every day oil markets react. And every day political pressure grows in multiple countries at once. Because wars do not simply escalate forever in the same way. Eventually they reach a new phase, and day 15 may have been the signal that the conflict is moving toward that next phase. 7 missile waves, 1 brand new weapon system, defensive interceptors running low, rising economic pressure across global markets, and several powerful capabilities still waiting in reserve. The war is not ending. It is choosing its next stage. And the real question now is not whether escalation will happen. The real question is which form of escalation appears next. If you want to understand how wars, geopolitics, and global markets connect and what they mean for the future, make sure you subscribe to Market Mindset, like this video, and share it with someone who wants to understand what's really happening behind the headlines. And tell me in the comments, what do you think the next phase of this war will look like?